The Blamannen by Manesolo. Fall was in the air. The leaves turning colors clung desperately to their trees in vain as the cool winds plucked them free and carried them away from what they had known. The school was bustling with the energy of all the kids yearning for the long-awaited weekend. My friend Jacob and I were staring at the clock while the teacher droned on about math equations that we would never use. Finally, after what seemed like an eternity, the bell rang, and we all jumped out of our seats and raced toward freedom. The crisp fall air hit our faces, and I took in a deep breath, wanting to fill my lungs with its refreshing taste. Jacob wrapped his muscular arm around my shoulders and asked, "Are you ready for this, Isaac?" Not knowing what to expect from the weekend's adventures excited me to my core. I looked him dead in the eyes, tried my best to make a serious face, and then, through uncontrolled laughter, I exclaimed, "You better believe it. I still can't believe we found it last time. It looked completely untouched." "Yeah, it's still odd we couldn't find it on any of the maps, even in the old archive at the library," Jacob puzzled. I thought back to the library and shrugged it off. It must have been a private or secret mine that no one reported. Just think of what may be down there. Cool rocks, dead animals, or even gold. Jacob's eyes glistened with the thought. "Okay, so let's go home and pack up, and I'll meet you in the morning over at the forest edge where we started last time." All night, I couldn't help but let my mind race with ideas of what we were going to see. I barely could put my mind to eating, but knew I needed it, so I scarfed down the food without even tasting it. Nighttime finally dropped into our valley, and I laid awake for hours from the anticipation. When I finally did drift off into sleep, my dreams were not echoes of that excitement, however. And I tossed and turned all night until I woke up to my alarm, my sheets soaked with sweat. I tried recalling what I dreamt of, but it was fading fast. All I could remember was a voice whispering, "Stay away." Disturbed by the fragmented dream, I hopped into the shower to clear my head and get washed up. Even through breakfast, all I could think about was that voice. What was its meaning? Did it even have any meaning? Did it mean for us to stay out of the mine? I kept dismissing it as just too many American horror stories that Jacob forced me to endure. But something about it just kept creeping back into my mind. I gathered my pack and climbing rope, determined to have a great adventure despite the odd dream, and headed out the door. The walk through town was nothing major, just a 30-minute hike, but it seemed to drag longer than the school day yesterday. And I still had some money in my pocket, so I grabbed a couple sunshine buns from the bakery on the way. Their cardamom, cinnamon, and custard would make an excellent snack later. The baker saw my climbing gear and remarked, "Getting into trouble again, eh, Isaac?" I chuckled and replied, "Hopefully no trouble today, just exploring some areas that we couldn't find anything on the maps." The often joyful and boisterous giant of a man let go of his smile. An almost pressing air of a thunderstorm of an expression fell on his face. "You boys aren't going to the north and exploring some caves, are you?" I was almost taken aback at the sudden change in his demeanor. No, sir. We're going to the hills on the east side of town. We thought we saw a tower or something and wanted to see if it was climbable. I managed to stumble out. It was something we would normally do. Over the summer, we had gotten in trouble with the constable as we climbed his radio shack. The dark demeanor slowly drained from the imposing baker's face as he returned to his normal self. Okay, kiddo, just be careful. Can't have my favorite customers in the hospital or in jail. He let out a loud belly laugh. Will do, I replied quickly, trying to hide my nervous chuckle. I continued to the meetup at the forest, mulling over what he said. Why caves? Did he mean the mine? Was there something dangerous in there? Was there a wolf den? I stopped in my tracks. A bear? Could there be a bear cave? Just while I was freaking myself out, I heard my name being shouted in the distance. I turned and saw Jacob running up, his backpack flailing from side to side as he ran and waved an arm in my direction. Jacob finally closed the distance and put his hands on his knees, breathing heavily. Ready to dive into some awesome finds? He managed to get out between breaths. Forgetting about everything I was just thinking, I jabbed a response back. Are you? You sound like you just ran for an hour straight. I busted out in laughter. Shut up. I had further to come than you, and it was uphill. He punched my arm. We both live downhill from here. I continued on. He finally composed himself and grabbed both straps in his hands. Let's go find some gold. We walked for about 2 hours through the forest, taking photos of some birds and other wildlife along the way. All the while talking about what was going on in our lives, what concerts were coming up, final exams right around the corner. Jacob teasing me about liking Emma, even though she's 2 grades up from us. We were starting to think we may be lost when we finally stumbled upon the fallen tree and bushes that marked the entrance to the mine we found. Here it is, finally, exclaimed Jacob. Now, let's get out the gear and then secure our packs. We spent a few minutes pulling out flashlights, headlamps, and gloves. We slid into our harnesses and secured the ropes and climbing anchors to the outside of our packs for easy access. With renewed energy, we threw on our packs and secured them with the waistbands and chest straps tight. Turning on the handheld lights, we both looked at each other, my face serious with intent, Jacob's his usual goofy self, but with the excitement of a 2-year-old with a new toy. I couldn't help but laugh at his demeanor. Let's go before you wet yourself, I chuckled. Jacob tore off toward the mine opening and crouched through the obstructions. After a few moments, I heard him call out, Okay, I'm through. Watch the ceiling. There's some timbers with exposed nails and I almost tore my pack. I crouched down and slowly made my way through the bushes and collapsed timber entrance. I looked up and saw the nails he was talking about. They were clearly handmade nails in rotten timber, so this mine was old. I didn't know anyone who would pay for handmade nails in this century. I finally crawled out of the collapsed entrance and stood up. I came up right next to Jacob, who was already taking in the sights. The supports were all still intact, if not a little rotten. The mine was definitely hand-carved, as the walls were jagged with tool marks. There was a track still held to the floor, sprawling out in front of us down the length of the tunnel. The silence was broken by Jacob first. "This is so cool," he shouted, giddy as a schoolgirl. His voice traveled down and back up the tunnel a few times before subsiding again. I remarked, "It must go a good way to echo like that." Jacob agreed. "Come on, let's go see if there's any cool stuff left over." We went down the long entrance tunnel for a good 15 or 30 minutes. And it was hard to tell how long we were walking until we finally came to a split off and a downward shaft. To the left was a short tunnel with a door. To the right, another tunnel, but was blocked off from a collapse. We went over to the door, and it was all covered in writing. People's names, dates, and one curious poem or something. Down we go, chasing treasure. When we stop, out our leisure. Black as coal, the tunnel looms. Beware the stick, that goes boom. "That's a funky poem," I blurted out. "I think I know what it means, though," Jacob mused as he was rubbing the stubble on his chin. He reached out and carefully opened the door. Inside was a small room carved out of the mountain. Inside were boxes, and the ground was littered with small cylindrical sticks. "Ah, just as I thought. There was a dynamite room," he advised. "We best leave this alone," as he slowly closed the door. We turned around and started walking away when we heard the clatter of a box falling behind the door. "Get down!" yelled out Jacob, as we both threw ourselves on the ground hard and covered our heads. A couple minutes passed and we both looked at each other, then back to the door. Nothing happened. "I guess they must have been bad after so many years," I pondered out loud. "Yeah, but to be safe, we are not opening that door again." "Okay, well, that covers that way. I'm not digging through that cave in. Only way is down," I noted. We took a couple of anchors and hammered them into the ground by the ladder, just in case the ladder wouldn't hold our weight. To our surprise, it held out the entire way down. In the opening, there were 3 tunnels again. The tunnel to the right collapsed, like the one above. Must have been a complex cave in there. The other 2 were wide open, though. We chose to go down the left tunnel. We traveled through again for a good trek, with nothing of note except an old pickaxe that had a broken handle. We came to another split. Both sections looked open as well. We put a reflector on each of the supports on the tunnel. We came so we wouldn't get lost. Then, when I was turning to start down the left tunnel, I caught a glint of something that looked like a light from the right tunnel. "Did you see that?" I asked Jacob. "That light down through there?" "I didn't see anything. Maybe it was something that caught your light." We both shined our light down the tunnel, trying to see if it would catch again, but nothing. Jacob turned and waved me on. "Come on, let's go this way first, and then we can check out that way on our way back." I shrugged and followed along before his excited butt left me behind. We walked for a couple minutes before the tunnel ended abruptly. In the wall, there was obviously a seam of some shiny material in the rock. We looked at each other with giddy laughter as we both pulled out our mini pick hammers. We both got a few chunks of the mineral, but couldn't tell what it was. We decided we would take it back to the geologist that works for the local rare earth elements company to see what it was. We might have scored big. I was still putting some of the samples into my waste bag when Jacob bumped into me. "The hell, dude?" I let out. I turned and saw Jacob staring off into the tunnel, face almost pale white. "What, dude?" "I thought I saw something. Or someone," he whispered, barely able to find his voice. "It was just there for a split second and then nothing." I shone my light down there, but there was nothing. Just hand-tooled walls and darkness past the edge of my light. Maybe it was just something reflecting like what I saw earlier. Maybe. The mind does come up with some crazy stuff sometimes. He nervously chuckled out. He started moving forward again, back the way we came. "Come on, let's go check out the other tunnel. There may be more back that way too." I started following him, but his remark made me remember my dreams from the last night and that voice, "Stay away." Maybe it was all in our heads. I shook my head to clear those thoughts. We found some shiny material. We could be rich. We came out to the tunnel den and turned down the unexplored branch. There was nothing on the walk down to note again. Seems whomever was here before made a good job packing up all their stuff. We came to another open section with 2 more tunnels branching off. We marked the tunnels again and decided on the left tunnel again. This one dead-ended with no veins of material, just an unfinished section. We backtracked and turned down the right one. After a few minutes, the tunnel opened up into a large cavern. We awed at the size of the massive expanse in the mountain. There were glinting seams running up and through the walls. We were both filled with wonder and excitement. Our flashlights pouring over all the minerals and crystals jutting from the walls. Then, my light found an opening on the far wall. It looked like another tunnel, but my heart stopped. My blood turned cold and ran thick as molasses. In the opening, there was a man standing there with an old handheld lantern. But it wasn't just a man. It was only half a man. And my light seemed to pass right through him to the rock wall behind. My hand shot out and grabbed Jacob's arm. "What?" he asked. I pointed over to the portal on the far wall. Jacob followed my light to the figure, and his eyes went wide. After a few agonizing seconds, a whisper-thin but reverberant voice yelled out, "Stay away!" I felt like my soul left my body. It was the same voice I heard in my dream. Jacob grabbed me and shook me hard. I was able to snap out of it. Then we both turned and ran, legs pounding the ground, hearts almost bursting. We followed our trail. We almost made it back to the den with the ladder, but then we heard an echoing boom from far away in front of us. The whole mountain shook with the fury of an awakened giant. The tunnel we were in started crumbling, and we started to run again. But before we could take off, a large rock fell on my back leg I was using to push off. It crushed my calf and pinned me to the ground. He yelled out in pain, and Jacob spun around. He rushed over to me while we were still being pelted by smaller debris. He struggled, but he was able to finally free my leg from under the rock. My leg was twisted and obviously broken. He helped me up and threw my arm over him as we stumbled back to the ladder. "I have to go up first to pull you up with the rope." He looked at me with more guilt than I have ever seen from him. Tears were welling up in my eyes, either from the pain in my leg or from the fear of being left alone. I don't know. But I nodded in agreement. It was the only way. The ladder wouldn't support us both, and I would need help to climb. He quickly but carefully climbed the creaky ladder. I leaned with my back against the ladder, my light pointing down the tunnel we just came out of for whatever that being was. It felt like a lifetime down in the dark. Every fiber of my being wanted to run in any direction. Just go. I was starting to panic again, but then the climbing rope flopped down to my side. I looked up, and Jacob leaned his head over the hole. "Come on, hook up," he yelled down. I quickly secured the climbing rope to my harness and double-checked the knots. I gave it 2 tugs to let him know I was ready. Just as I was turning to start my hopping up the ladder, I saw him again. I froze. He was in the opening with me. The lantern was flickering with a pale flame. His shirt and overalls saturated with dust. Hair that frayed out in all directions shrouded a pale face. The shirt flowed down to a torn edge where the rest of his body should be. He just floated there, nothing holding him up. His eyes were white, but I felt the anguish behind them. The figure opened their mouth to rotten teeth and shouted again, "Stay away!" Just then, I was hoisted off the ground and started rising up jerkingly. I then realized Jacob was frantically pulling me up. I gathered myself again and started pulling myself up with my arms on the ladder to help. I finally reached the top, and Jacob pulled my exhausted and broken body out of the hole, and I landed on splintered wood. I winced as some of it stuck in my skin. I looked around, and what I saw, I almost couldn't believe it. The doorway was blown completely from where it stood and smashed into the far wall in splinters. There was nothing left of the dynamite but singed rock and a fresh cave-in. I looked back at Jacob, who was panting with exhaustion, and begged, "Let's get out of here." We stumbled back through the tunnels to the entrance, where I painfully dragged my leg through. Finally outside again, the sun blisteringly bright, I was able to assess the damage to my leg. It was definitely broken. There was a little section of bone poking through the skin. I winced and tears fell from my eyes as we wrapped it with a splint. It took hours for us to trudge through the woods, but as soon as we got a signal on our phones, Jacob called for an ambulance. They were there at the edge of the forest, and the medics rushed in to meet us as soon as they saw us. I was in the ambulance before I knew it. I was positioned up in the stretcher, and right before the door was closed, I saw the figure through the trees. He stared at me for a moment, and then turned away. The doors closed, and I blacked out. Thanks for sitting in the dark with me tonight. If you enjoyed this Professor Broke reading, you can find more on YouTube and TikTok under the same name, Broke Breaks Books. If you'd like to share your story with the B3 community, shoot it over to brokebreaksbooks@gmail.com. Hit that like and subscribe button to become a B3 Cube. Oh, and remember, Bugs Bunny lied to you. TNT and dynamite sticks are not the same thing.